Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Indy 500 qualifying here for the VOR iRacing IndyCar series. This is in preparation for the 12th running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race presented by ALZ.org with the Alzheimer's Association. We will bring in Dan Ench in about half an hour to talk more about that. And that was not supposed to happen. That was my own audio. So as you can already tell, I was already afraid for this. This is my first broadcast in about 2 years or so. So there will be things that might go wrong, but you know, it's all fun and games. This is more of a relaxed broadcast, but diving into qualifying here, a clean run is required. Both your out lap, hot laps and in laps. If we record any incident points, that run is invalid. Positions 1 through 30 are decided today. Each driver has got 1 attempt per hour. This is for pole day, so the pole position is already pretty much decided. So we are just about to lock in the final few positions for today's race, for next week's race, I should say. So before we dive into things, we already have one driver ready to go here. We'll show some runs from earlier in the day as we get ready for, I guess, a very intense final couple minutes here, as we already have most of the field locked up. But we'll take a look at Timothy Bree here. This was earlier today in the second session of the day. In the first session, it was a bunch of big names that really set in a very fast and, I guess, convincing time as well. You can see the timings right here. Liam O'Sullivan currently on the pole with a 39.117 average of 4 laps. Then it's Edson Santos in second. He set his run in this second session. We will take a look at his run in just a moment as well. But yeah, as I said, on board here with Timothy Bree to come across the line for his run. This is going to start his run right here. So first lap 39.178. But going quickly through the order some more. I got myself in P3. I said this in the beginning of the week. There was a lot of requests for coverage of qualifying and there was nobody really available to do it. And I also did not want to stick somebody up here to talk about cars for 6 hours straight. So that's why I'm doing this here. I got my way into the field already earlier today, which is where I sit in third at the moment, so a pretty good starting spot outside of the front row for myself. But Timothy Bree here finishing another lap 39.314, which isn't particularly great. Ideally you want to be in the 39 zeros if you want to be right at the sharp end of the field. But you know, the field spread in this field is actually very tight. Like I mentioned, you got Liam on the provisional pole with a 39.1, but if you look very closely to, let's take P5 through, let's say P15, you can see a bunch of drivers separated by less than 1,000th of a second or even 2,000th of a second. So it's all very, very close here in the field today. And as I mentioned, positions 1 through 30 decided today. Should we get there, which is going to be very interesting if we do, as Timothy finishes his run here with his final lap of his run. He got up to 21st quick at the end of it all. So not a bad run by any means. He is well inside the field without any trouble really. But what I was going to touch upon is if the field is not filled up, we will have bump day next week on Friday, September 6th. So that's really when the crunch time is going to start, because people will obviously want to qualify their way into the race. And as is tradition, the fastest 33 will make the race, and we will have a 3-wide start as well. So getting into this field is going to be very tough and difficult next week. We didn't quite have the turnout today, but I can guarantee you next week it is going to be extremely tight on who is going to make it into the field. Just to name a few drivers who are going to be qualifying next week, it will be Seb Alexander, Matthias Strauss, Lorenzo Bonder, Matthias Kraus, not to be confused with Matthias Strauss, but Kraus. So a few very big names, including Jordan Kernau as well. They will be trying to qualify their way into the field. And as it stands, we have about 6 spots open, including invalidated runs from earlier today. So it's all to play for with about 9 drivers ready to go again on Friday. As we watch Sepp Kinde here, this is still in the second session. So what I did find is when you're driving around this track by yourself, it's very difficult to keep the concentration because you're constantly looking at your reference points and trying to make adjustments, which is undoubtedly what Seb is trying to do here as well. Trying to stay on top of his tools, which is a very tricky thing to do when you're trying to get every single detail right here. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway is, on paper at least, very easy. It's got 4 left turns, but as anybody who is at least remotely interested in racing probably knows, even taking 4 simple, so to speak, turns is very difficult to master and nail, and to do it consistently over 10 miles and 4 laps is very difficult to do. And like I mentioned, the tools of the car as well. You got the anti-roll bars and the weight jacket to deal with. Now, for such a short run of 4 laps, especially in these conditions, I should also add, by the way, you won't be all over them like you would on a very hot and slick track. But it's still very important to get them right, because you can scrub speed very easily if you have too much understeer in the car, or of course you can scrub speed if you have too much oversteer in the car. So getting that balance just right is extremely important to get right. And it seems that Liam O'Sullivan has mastered that earlier today. I heard from a little birdie that he's been practicing pretty much non-stop for about a week. So it's no surprise to see him on the pole, but Seb carrying good speed throughout his run here. As you can see, this I believe is his final lap of his run, with about 32 minutes left in session 2 from earlier today, as I already mentioned a few times. So top speed, about 2:33 at the line here to close it off, 39.260. Not a bad run by any means. And that at the moment has Seb well inside the field in P12. So good run there by Seb. I believe this was his last run as well. So Seb Kinder in the field in his beautiful Marlboro throwback paint scheme for Team Watson Racing setups. I hope you guys also like the overlay colors. We've been experimenting with this earlier in the season during the race broadcasts, but now we have the option as well to put in a CSV. And to explain quickly what a CSV is, I'm not going to go into the name because I don't even know it myself, but it's a Google spreadsheet basically that we're using with all the drivers' information, and we can, including the colors, enter every single detail about the driver and the team. So, for example, Seb's car here is red and white, so his overlays are going to be red and white as well, excluding the base, of course, as you can see, it's black here. But looking at Edson Santos here, driver who did qualify second in this session. This is that attempt that we covered just briefly during the running order. Edson Santos has won the DW12 championship, so he has been granted free entry to join the IR18 series for the remainder of the year, and he has taken up that offer, and he is here to show what he is capable of. And well, as I mentioned, he qualified in second, so I think he showed pretty well what he is capable of, including that championship, of course, in the DW12s. But Edson bringing his car up to speed very slowly here, and I'll quickly explain what he is doing from a driver's perspective. You saw him on pit road earlier, maybe you heard him, maybe you did not, but he is warming his engine. And that can basically give you a few extra RPMs. A hotter engine runs faster, so you can get better speed. And then what he does coming off of pit road is rolling off very slowly to not put any unnecessary stress on the tires, to keep them in as fresh of a condition as possible. And speaking of the conditions, you can see the conditions right here. Static weather to provide a level playing field here. 65 degrees Fahrenheit air temperature and track temperature. So a very cool morning it is in the sim. 6:30 in the morning is where these drivers qualify, and the reason for that is we wanted to have realistic speeds, which we do not unfortunately have in iRacing normally when you would run normal weather, for example. So that's why we went cooler, to get more or less a realistic reading of speeds. Of course, if you watch the Indy 500 and especially qualifying, you will probably know that drivers are touching 243 into turn 3, for example, if you get a tailwind, a nice tailwind there. We aren't quite capable to do that in the sim just yet, but 235 like Edson is doing to start his second lap is really not a bad number by any means, and ideally you want to keep the number above 230 for most of the lap and throughout the run, which he is doing right here, pulling through the gears up to turn 3 here, taking a very early apex or a very early arc into the turn. There's various different lines that you can take, especially in these conditions where it's pretty cool, quite literally, and there's lots of ways to go fast here. So Uh, you can take a tighter line entering the turns. You can also take a very wide line and really keep the exit off of turn 1 and into turn 2 very tight right here to kind of make the track a square instead of a perfect rectangle like Indianapolis is. But yeah, like I mentioned, you can also just take a very early apex and make it more of a rectangle. There's different ways about it. There's no real line that is actually quickest. It's mainly driver preference and how you handle that driver preference as well. As Edson here is coming across the line to start his final lap, I believe. So this lap is going to be a 39.182. Diving into turn 1 for the final time on his run. And he is taking a very nice line through turn 2 there. I noticed that, especially with Edson, that he really gets all the way down to that concrete strip. And a number of drivers, including myself, we've been trying to get there, but we don't have the ultimate confidence to get there. And the reason for that is, if you clip that gray piece of concrete right there, it really unsettles the car and you can easily go for a spin and you can ruin your day basically as well. So it's very important to get right to it, but not on it. And like I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, it's very tight margins to pull that off. So Edson did it great. He qualified second, which was first at the time. But a very, very nice and strong run there by Edson in his first qualifying and gonna be his first race session in about a week's time from now. As we quickly go live here to Raid Ritza, who is going to make it another attempt. So he has now gone out onto the track, so his P15 time will be eliminated. And I will quickly touch upon the rules once again, as Raid is gonna go again. So, as I mentioned, positions 1 through 30 are decided today. Positions 31 through 33 are decided next week on Friday, which I will also be covering, by the way. But drivers get as many as 8 attempts during the day. But if they go out again after setting a run, their previous run will be deleted from the timesheets. So that's why I mentioned Raid is now deleting his time. So this is basically all or nothing for him. He wants more track position. He is in the field, provided he keeps his run clean. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see if he can pull it off and actually have a clean run. It's very difficult to do when you're under pressure like this. I say under pressure, there's not much pressure, so to speak, other than keeping your car outside of the wall. But you also have to have a clean run, which I briefly touched upon in the intro. If you get a off-track point for anything at any point during your run is invalid. So even if you touch the grass on the in-lap after your run is completed, your run doesn't count. So that's very important for Raid, especially right now, to remember that as he is on his run. So let's see what he can do. I'm pretty curious. I'm pretty optimistic for him as well. I think he can do a pretty decent job. We've seen from that timesheet that he does have the speed to do it. He has the tools under control. So I'm pretty curious to see if he can pull it inside the top 10 perhaps, which will be a very good result for him. As I mentioned, he is trying to keep his speed above 230 miles per hour, which he did pretty well through turn 1 that time around. Drops off quite a bit there in turn 2. So this is, at the moment, not tracking like an improvement as far as I can see. But maybe he'll surprise us. Maybe his consistency can really surprise us as well. Speaking of consistency, you could see it especially earlier in the day with people like Liam and Edson. They were really consistent throughout their run. And I feel like personally myself as well, I wasn't inconsistent, but I didn't have the same level I had and Edson had. And you see that especially throughout the field. You can see a bunch of people that did set a 39.1, 39.2 at the very lowest to open their run with. And then they really dropped off to a 39.4, even a 39.5 is what I've seen earlier today. So the drop off can be significant if you're not on top of your tools, and it's gonna bite you, I can guarantee you. So it's a very fine line that you're walking with the in-car adjustments. If you know what you're doing, it doesn't really mean much. But some people might not be as experienced with the car or the tools. And I think Raid, even though he goes top in this session, he will go, I think, around about P18. So not a very great run for him there. Um, but yeah, to quickly touch back on the leaderboard, I should probably explain this as well. So the way that we're doing it is, as I mentioned, the previous lap time gets deleted if you go out again. But also every session result is updated after the session. So in 43 minutes time, we'll know if Raid indeed got P18 or not. But his time did get removed. So I will bring up the timesheets very quickly here before we move on to some more runs from earlier in the day. As you can see, Raid was 15th. That time will be removed. So you can imagine him in P29 at the moment, behind Tyne and Lucas at the moment, as Raid does not have any attempt on the board. So that moves everybody from Gary Lovren up into the top 15, at least at the moment. So we'll see what's going to happen at the end of this. But let's move on to session number 5 and watch Joseph Morales, Jomo, in the 70 car. Beautiful red paint scheme. As I mentioned earlier, we collected all the colors from all the drivers, all the details, and I think Joseph has got one of the better liveries of the league at the moment. I do have a soft spot for red in a way. I think it's a color that really fits Indy cars for some reason. I don't know why I think that. I just do. People will probably come at me and say, "Oh well, I like yellow," but I like red. So yeah, Joseph on his first lap of his run, I should say, scrubbing quite a bit of speed. This run at the end of the day, I believe it's this exact run, was good enough for P20 at that time. So first lap, pretty solid. 39.1, I believe, is what I saw there for just a brief moment. And again, dropping off quite a bit in turn 2. So just like Ray Ritza just did, dropping off quite a lot of speed in turn 2. And I think the main area where you can lose your run is really in turn 2, because the wall really creeps up on you more so than turn 4 in a way. I always feel like as well when I'm driving, turn 2 is a lot tighter than turn 4 for some reason. So because of that very reason, it's very easy to hit the wall, and you can easily see that as well when people don't have their tools set up right. And Joseph here is taking quite a bit of steering input in turn 1. Turn 2, he is just above that white line, which is not ideal. Ideally, you want to be below it, like I already touched upon earlier. You want to be right next to that concrete patch inside the white line, whilst we were watching Edson Santos do that. So Jomo quite a bit off that, but doesn't look like a very terrible run here as well from the outside. Of course, we know that he got into P20, but really not a slow run by any means. It's still a 39.26, so pretty solid and consistent run as well at the moment, 39.3. So yeah, it looks like everybody has been hitting about 2-3 tenths of drop off during the run, and that's about it. So the cool conditions definitely help with that. If qualifying would have been hotter, you know, we'd probably see about 6-7 tenths fall off, to be completely honest with you. But it's still really good to see that we can hit these kind of speeds in iRacing, even though the error is from 2020. And if you remember to those very boring and lonely days during the pandemic, the Indy 500 was held in August, and those conditions were hot. It was unbelievably hot. I think it was even hotter than the 2018 race, which was unseasonably hot as well for a May race. Of course, the Indy 500 usually run on Memorial Day weekend in May, but because of that 2020 arrow that we had, the speeds were also quite significantly down, and you can still see that to this day. iRacing, of course, has had a pretty difficult situation with IndyCar. I think the people close to the community, and even those who are inside the community, you know, partners, Wise, those kind of people, they probably have heard about it as well from, you know, their driver close relatives on iRacing, that, you know, the license situation wasn't pretty. And because of that reason, the car has not been updated. So we are still stuck with 2020 Aero in 2024. And it looks like we are going to go that way into 2025 still. But, you know, maybe we'll see some big updates for 2025 Season 1 on iRacing. As we are watching Adam Millward on his run. So Aiden's run here was good for P11, so he is in the first third of the field, and this is exactly where Aiden wanted to be. He wanted to be safe in the field first and foremost, but he also wanted track position, is what I heard him talk about. So that's exactly what he was getting here, right here, as he exits corner number 4. Let's see what this lap is going to be, and again, it's going to be a 39.2. So like I said, a couple tenths drop off from every single lap that you do. As Aiden makes his way down into turn 3 now. 233, can he touch 234? Nah, just can't. But still carrying good speed through turn 3. Just tips under 230 there. Just briefly 228, but mostly 229. And it drops to 227 in turn 4. As Aiden is going too fast for the cameras to catch him. I guess that's a compliment if I've ever seen one. But across the line he goes. 39.264 again. And this will be his final lap of the run. Scrubbing a lot more speed this time around. 2 miles an hour slower than the previous lap. So it wouldn't surprise me if this run is going to be a 39.3 or so. As he is... Oh, I just barely did not touch 234. I thought he was going to get 234 there. But just missed it in his Bremen Motorsports livery. And I talked about this earlier with him in the week. For some reason, I thought it was Bremen eSports, but it's Bremen Motorsport. As he comes across the line to finish his run. 39.309, which, as mentioned, slots him into P11 for qualifying today on pole day. Again, next week, Friday, September 6th, is going to be bump day. And the first 30 positions today are decided, and the final row will be decided next week. Provided we get to 30 cars, of course, today, which at the moment is going to be very close to it. Tijn van der Velde and Lucas Santos have invalidated attempts. Both of those drivers did set runs earlier in the day. And they got invalidated for incident points or simply just making a mistake hitting the wall and not putting in the required number of laps. So that's why those guys have invalidated attempts, and it essentially counts as a no time set. As we are watching Hugo Gallas on his first run of the day. Just briefly touched 234 miles per hour into turn 3. And Hugo right on that wide line. Like I mentioned, you want to be just a little bit more to the left, but this line is already much better than what we've seen earlier in the show. As he comes across the line. 39.145, pretty solid lap there by Hugo. Hugo has put in quite a bit of practice for this. And it's showing pretty well at the moment in his number 18. Used to be part of Backfire Motorsports a few years ago, and even until earlier this year. A driver who has raced in Lionheart, in the Retro Series, and in the IndyCar Series, and I believe also in the Speedway Series, in the DW12. Of course, we also have the DW12s here at VOR, which brings me to my advertising overlays, which are brand new. Thanks to David Croyd for that. Really helped me out here. It will scroll through all the sponsors and everything. The IFS Personal Financial Planning, Alzheimer's Association, and also more information about us, the league. You can see here the Sprint IndyCar Series is on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern or 9 p.m. Central European Summertime. It's open setups and free to enter. The Iconic Series with the DW12s, which I just briefly mentioned, on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern as well. At 9 p.m. Central European, fixed setups, free to enter, and of course the premier IndyCar Series with the i18s, which we're qualifying for right here, the Indy 500 on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern as well, fixed setups, and you can enter the rest of the season for $15. So that is the quick plug about the league. Back to qualifying now. Hugo Gallas on his final lap of his run. Scrubbing quite a bit of speed now. He is on his 4th lap. Still tracking around about P11, P12 at the moment. There he comes out of turn 4. Let's see what this lap is going to be. 39.289. So pretty solid run, puts him into P13 provisionally on the leaderboard with 48 minutes to go in session 6. I do believe we have one more driver from session 6 that will go out later, and there it is. It's Stijn van der Velde in the Altena Autosport number 76. Had a tough day today, trying to get up to speed. Did not have the time to really practice, and he's going to try to make the most of it. Not a very experienced oval racer he is, but I do have to say, even though Tijn is a teammate of mine, he's a very good driver, especially on the road courses. But what's very impressive as well is he only needs about 5 laps on an oval to know what to do, and that's very impressive for him, because Stijn is not an oval racer by any stretch of the imagination. So for him to basically come in here, roll off the truck, and get into the car, and right there, turn at 39.161 is very impressive. As we continue to watch him through turn 2, very close to the outside wall, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier. You can really make this track either a square or a rectangle. Didn't really get a good line through turn 2, so that's really going to hurt his lap time here. Was way offline there, way above the white line as well, so I do not think this lap is going to be any good, but maybe he will positively surprise us. Let's see across the line. As there he goes, 39.3. So not too bad, considering he completely missed turn 2 there. But yeah, obviously not great, as we've already seen people do 39.1s and 2s. As Stijn gets through turn 2 and gets way out wide and hits the wall, and that's his attempt done. And this was his invalidated attempt from earlier that I mentioned. So Stijn van der Velde was in the field, and now he is not, because Stijn was not able to do another run before he had other commitments to get to. So Stijn van der Velde is going to have to come back next week on Friday to try and bump his way into the field, as we now watch Karel Stout in the newly formed Dual Sierra Alliance racing team. And I do have to say, I really do love this livery. It somehow reminds me in a way of the Lotus F1 cars from the early 2010s. I know it's a completely opposite color scheme. It's white and gold instead of black and gold, which of course is derived from the John Player special in the 70s and early 80s. But it's a very good looking paint, so whoever did it, hats off to you. Looks very good. In the 43 car across the line, first lap going to be a 39.14, so a pretty solid lap, but still tracking slower than the pole sitter Liam O'Sullivan at the moment. So at the moment he will probably be aiming for around about a top 10. As he comes into turn 3. And I did notice as well, Karel is really taking a weird line on the straightaways. Most people are right up against the wall, because there is a very small, it's a very minimal suction effect that you get, but it's effectively a draft from the wall that you get, so there's less air resistance right next to the wall. And that's the same reason why in stock car racing you see that as well at tracks like Darlington, which they're racing at this week. But also at Indianapolis, and especially in iRacing at least. I'm not sure about the real effect in real life, but in iRacing there is a definite wall draft, or a wall suck if you want to call it that, and it can gain you very small amounts, but every little bit helps, of course, especially during Indy 500 qualifying. So Karel trying to make the most of that in the short shoots, but not so much down the front straights, which is surprising to me. But what I guess he's trying to do is drive the shortest distance around the track, which is a fair thing to try and do. But yeah, not really tracking anything special at the moment. It's first in session 6 at that time for his fastest lap, but his average is actually way down to 17th. This run was, so yeah, a lot of room for improvement at the moment for Karel Stout, but a very solid starting point, and of course, as is the most important thing, he is well inside the field, which is probably the main thing everybody wanted to focus on today. We were expecting 30 cars to qualify their way in. Didn't quite get there, but we got close, which is important. As Karel finishes his run and did indeed go 17th quickest. So on to the next car in line, Cameron Bastian, or Bastain. I still don't know how to pronounce his name. Cameron, I really apologize. We've known each other for, I want to say 2 or 3 years. He's been in the league since 2021, I'm pretty sure. I vaguely remember we also raced at Phoenix when he was teammates with Nicolas Sadiq. And flex incoming, I won that race. So, yeah. But yeah, Cameron and I have raced against each other for quite a long time. Still don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm very sorry, good sir. But Cameron on his run in his Team Watson Racing number 86 car in the green and purple car. And this was one of the more difficult paint schemes to get an overlay for because the car is mostly purple, but we also have a few other purple cars in the league. And we don't have quite as many green cars. So we went with green, and hopefully he likes the style of overlay. Speaking of which, I have to give a huge shout out to P1 Broadcasting. My good friend Gary Gotso recently started his own channel. Broke away from a broadcasting channel that shall not be named. But does a great job on his new channel. They broadcast NASCAR trucks and mostly IndyCar, of course, as well. They're still kind of in a transitional period, but in 2025, especially for the IndyCar iRacing series, all that coverage will be right there on P1 Broadcasting. So you can check them out on YouTube at P1 Broadcasting. Gary is the main man that got the overlay into life. Of course, the developer made it, but Gary was the one that spearheaded the project. And he allowed me to use it for not only Velocity Online Racing broadcasts that he does for us in-house, but also for myself to do what I do here for you guys right now, but also the Sprint Series and other projects that are in the making in terms of my own broadcasting. So I want to really thank Gary for that. As Cameron comes across the line for a 39.498. And he is very much off the pace right here. This is 2/10 slower than what you ideally want to get, but I do think he has one more crack at it for his final lap. And if you go to the timesheets, 27th quick at the moment. So not a very good day for Cameron, but it is good enough at the moment to get him into the field, which I believe is his main objective. As I mentioned a couple times already, and I probably will a few more times, people were expecting 30 cars, we didn't get there. So as long as people get a lap on the board, or a run on the board I should say, and it's clean, then you're in the field. So this is what Cameron is trying to do as he backs way off, and that is his run complete. So P5 in session 6, P27 overall, and well inside the field. So Cameron Bastian, P27, comes to a halt right here. And we are off to some quick information about the schedule before we dive into chat. I'm sure there's a few people watching. We'll get to you guys in just a moment. Just quickly want to touch the schedules first. So as we see here, the sprint schedule. September 12th starts the second Sprint IndyCar Series season, and I will be broadcasting this right here on the VOR channel at Zandvoort on September 12th, as I said. September 19th, next week, the Indy Road Course. Then the Indy Oval right the next week on September 26th. Then there is an off week on the 3rd of October for personal reasons. But it also fits in nicely with the schedule anyway. So October 10th it is for Brands Hatch. And October 17th for the Red Bull Ring. Moving on to the iconic series, the DW12, which I briefly mentioned when we were on board with Hugo Galles. September 6th, just before bump day qualifying gets underway, is the Indy 200. The Alzheimer's Association Indy 200 will be right here on the VOR channel as well, which will be broadcasted by Gary Gotso and the crew at P1 Broadcasting. Kyle Clanworth is also involved there. September 20th, Nashville. October 4th, California, Autocross Speedway, which is sadly demolished now, RIP. But October 18th is Pocono, then Kentucky, Phoenix, Michigan, and to close out the season at Las Vegas. Moving on to the remainder of the schedule for the IndyCar series, the IR18s, Nashville is after the Indy 500 next week. On September 21st is Nashville. Laguna Seca, October 5th. Then Pocono, Kentucky, Phoenix, Detroit, and Las Vegas, the 500K. Let's see if there's anything in chat to talk about. Oh, there's plenty of people that have said something in the chat. Hello, Liam. Hello, Yaroslav. Hello, Patrick. Bart is even in here. I'm surprised to see you. You were in the US, right? Adam Millward is in here. Pretty cool to see you guys. I'll go from top to bottom here as we watch some more qualifying runs. Ray Versa's earlier attempt, of course, we saw his latest, so you can disregard this attempt. We already saw his most recent. But Liam pointing out that I'm a cheeky git for pointing out that he practiced the whole week. Bloody tryhards, tell me about it. Nice cheesing caught in 4K. That's about Edson Santos. Whatever you can do to go fast. Adam Millward is on the telly. Hello, Adam's mom. What corner on the oval do I like the most at Indianapolis? Well, the politically correct answer is all of them. But I actually kind of like turn 1 because you can really just send it there in the race. If you're trying to pass somebody, you can either just dive bomb them or just send it right around the outside. It's easier to do there in turn 1 than it is in turn 3, I find. Not that it can't be done, but turn 1 is the main overtaking spot, and it's the main spot for chaos as well on restarts because there's a nasty bump. And chaos is good in my opinion, as long as it's not too much. Which I believe I said something similar in the Gateway race a few weeks ago. And this is my channel. If you're under, well, I'll say if you're under 12, close your ears for just a second. It was a shit show, but it was the good kind of shit show. It had crashes, but it really made the race interesting because people really had to be on top of their cars. So yeah, there's a big difference between a good shit show and a bad shit show, and I think that was one of the good ones. But yeah, going to Indianapolis again. Turn 1 is going to be very interesting. Of course, we will have a 3-wide start next week. There's a bunch of people in the league that are new, so I'm quite curious to see how they will do on a 3-wide start. I don't think many people of those that are new to the league have done one before, so I'm pretty curious to see how it goes. Last season it went well. We do have a few new rules in place to kind of keep it tighter together for the start to make it race a bit better on the first lap. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to take turn 1 with 23 cars next week, especially when Liam is on the pole. But yeah, I think it's going to be great. I think it's a great event for everybody. You know, I say this with bias because I'm the organizer, but I think this qualifying format as we have it this season, although apparently it was confusing for some people, I do think it's pretty simple and people generally know what they're able to do and everything. So yeah, that's about it. It's we're fully up to speed with everything that's happened as we just watched one of Ritza's earlier runs. It is now time to bring in Dan Ench, and I do hope that he is here. Let's see, Mr. Dan Ench. Hi Dan, do you have a copy, my man? I do not hear you, unfortunately. Can you... Or is it on my end? Let me check really quickly. Somehow I'm not able to hear you. Everything else is turned on. So I'm very confused. Oh, I'm getting you very far away, Dan. That's the problem. No worries. Take your time. So, as I mentioned, the Indy 500 next week, whilst we give Dan a moment to see if anything is wrong with his mic on his end. I am able to hear him, but it's very quiet. So hopefully we can get that fixed. But what I was going to go at again next week, the Indy 500, as I mentioned, 3 white start, a bunch of new people in the league who are trying to qualify. And at the moment, this is the order in which it stands before the final times are added to the not to the broadcast, to the spreadsheet, to the timing list. And at the moment, it's got, let me count, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 rookies in the league. Now, not all of those people are inexperienced by any means. They're just new to the league. So people like Lucas Lodato, Andreas Eich, and Lucas Santos as well, very talented drivers. Jarno Kausch is very talented on the road courses. Haven't seen much of him on ovals, but I think he's pretty decent on them as well. So yeah, you have a bunch of new faces to the league, and I think it's going to really make things interesting because it's a 500-mile race. Not all of those people will be used to such an endurance race, because normally most IndyCar oval races are between, let's say, 250 and 375 miles now with Texas last year. So it's quite a lot longer than those kinds of races, the Indy 500 is. So it's going to be interesting to
Like
see
it,
what
isn't
they
it?
can do. And there we go. Dan Inch, I can hear you now.
Yeah,
So
I forgot I got a driver update on my microphone. I had to reinstall it. So here we are.
no worries. So the reason we bring in Dan Ench is Dan Ench is a, let's say, an advocate for the Alzheimer's Association, if we can call it that. English is not my first language. I hope I use the right word. But Dan has really helped us out in the league before, and he is putting up his own money to spread awareness for the Alzheimer's Association. So Dan, go ahead and tell us more about that, and also where to go.
Well, as you know, I've got a vested interest in trying to end ALS, as they say. I have a mother who has been suffering with it for about 12 or 13 years now, and we're so so desperate to find an answer to this thing. This has been going on since 1906 when it was first diagnosed by Dr. Alois Alzheimer, and the only way he could find out exactly what was going on with his patients, who all seemed to be experiencing the same types of dementia, was unfortunately through autopsy. And of course, we'd like to be able, with today's technology, to find out more with just a look instead of waiting for the patient to pass on so we can get more information. And they're working on all that stuff right now. But all of this research, all of these medications, all of the things that it takes to try to whip a disease like this costs money. And they need some help. And Alzheimer's Association is the leading proponent of trying to find the answers to these problems. And you can help just by going to alz.org, alz.org. That is the Alzheimer's Association. And when you go to that page, you'll notice that there's a big yellow donate button up on the right hand side. But if you scroll down, there's a little green button on the bottom of that page. Now, the big donated button is a fixed amount. Okay. Now, if you go to the green button, you can donate anything you want, $2, $1.50, whatever you can spare. We'll take it. We would love to have your donations and your support in trying to lick this thing.
So as you mentioned, it's a very personal cause for you, Dan. I'm quite curious. You've raced in other leagues, and I do know with other leagues that, including one that shall not be named, um, you've also uh, promoted the Alzheimer's Association. I guess you could call it that. So, what's the connection in VOR, at least for you personally, where you think you can I have to think about how to phrase this properly because I don't want to offend anybody, which is not my intention, of course. But I'm quite curious to think about the thought process of going out there and spreading awareness, like you say that you want to do, which I think is great to do, and also
Uh-huh.
helps us support. But I want to know the thought process of getting that out on YouTube on sim racing. I think it's a very interesting idea to think about.
Well, yeah, and there's actually a growing professionalism among, uh, I don't know what would be the proper word for it, among people who like to go out and get donations for certain causes. And we quickly realized that there's a lot of people that pay attention to iRacing. So I wear it on my car, whatever league I'm in, I wear it on my car. I do some sponsoring of certain races, especially if they're broadcast races. In fact, that's actually kind of a qualification of the process. It doesn't do me any good if they're not being broadcasted. And VOR is well known for having webcast all of the races and getting a little bit of awareness that way, which is why we go with the sponsorship program that we do with VOR, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to do that. But the thing is, there are so many people who have this dementia in their lives, either as a caregiver or maybe they suffer themselves a little bit. There's 12 different kinds of dementia. We're not just about Alzheimer's really, but Alzheimer's is a big part of at least six of those types of dementia, and we just want to get the word out any way we can. We also do the things like the walk. Every state has a walk for Alzheimer's scheduled sometime during the year. It's different months in different states, but we invite you to get a hold of Alzheimer's Association and ask what's going on in your area, what's going on in your state. Get a hold of somebody and ask all those questions that we don't really have time to discuss right now. And if you can't go to als.org, the phone number is 800 272 3900, and we will take any kind of help we can get. And if you do have somebody in your life that's suffering from dementia or specifically Alzheimer's, this is a great place to go to find out where to get you some help. That's one of the biggest problems. This disease doesn't affect the disease ridden as much as it does the caregivers, because it is such a burden. And I don't want to say that because you don't want to think of your loved ones as being a burden, but it's a burden on your own stress levels. It causes great stress when you can't communicate with the people that you love the most. And caregivers give all they can for the people they love, to the point where they're not taking care of themselves. And one of the big sayings in Alzheimer's Association is you can't take care of them if you can't take care of yourself first. And Alzheimer's Association has a really good way of trying to explain that to you, a lot better than I can do. So we invite you to get a hold of them, alz.org, alz.org.
And I have to ask as well. You mentioned a phone number that you can call to. I think it's probably important to mention for those who might not be familiar with phone numbers. That's an American phone number, correct?
Yes, that is the USA phone number, 1-800-272-3900.
Yeah, just for everybody in Europe. Be very careful. You might want to look for other alternatives to also help the Alzheimer's Association indirectly, maybe through a European organization like that. Of course, this is all about Alzheimer's disease, but we don't want people to make any unnecessary costs for call fees, for example. Just want to put that out there, just to be sure. But thanks a lot, Dan, for your time and explanation. I'd love to help you out with this and spread awareness for you. Hopefully, I don't have to deal with any of this later on in my life. But if I do, I'll be sure to ask you for advice as well. But yeah, thanks a lot, Dan, for everything that you do for us and also for the Alzheimer's Association, of course. And hopefully for you, qualified currently in P10, you can do well next week and put out some more words and awareness during the broadcast next week. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Yeah, and speaking of the qualifying and all that stuff itself, I loved your explanations. A lot of people think you just step on the gas and go in an Indy car, and you did a good job of explaining what you do before you even pull out of the pits, what you do on the warm-up lap to save your tires. That's really the kind of information that the layman really needs to understand. And of course, that's just the beginning of it. You get out on there and track, and you're constantly working the tools. Gust of wind might change your whole plans. I mean, everything is so by the moment, and you did a great job of explaining that. And I want to thank you for your support for Alzheimer's Association too, but especially doing what you're doing for the webcast today. I'm loving it.
Of course, and yeah, it's actually something that I tell my girlfriend about a lot about the adjustments. Like she thinks we just turn left, but we don't. And other people don't adjust their cars as much, and they don't finish as well. So, like you said, it's
Now,
very important.
you got to tell me something now, okay? When you try to explain all this stuff to your girlfriend, is she really interested, or is she going, "Okay, dear"?
I mean, when I talk to my girlfriend about this stuff, she doesn't always understand what I'm talking about, and I'll put in these technical phrases of like, well, I say technical, but when I say you want to go high, she doesn't understand what high means. Then she's like, high, you mean in the sky or whatever? And then it's just the outside line, right? But also the weight jacket of roll bar, she has no idea what those mean. But we can always teach these people. But um, I I do this stuff because I love it, and just like you do as well. So it's really a pleasure to do it for you and everybody. So thanks for your kind words, Dan, and we'll move on to some qualifying runs to close out the final hour because I see people want to see those runs. So we'll go cover those, and I'll speak to you off cam, and of course, uh, hopefully as well after the race next week.
See you right around the next corner.
See you around the turn 2.
Yep.
All right, see you, Dan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye bye.
All right, well, it's time to look at some more qualifying runs. And whilst I pull those up, let's look at the schedule for the IndyCar Series one final time before we dive into those runs, as I mentioned. So we started the season all the way at Homestead, Miami in June. We have now worked our way up to Indy 500 qualifying. The race is next week. Then it's off to Nashville, Laguna Seca, Pocono, Kentucky, Phoenix, Detroit, and Las Vegas. As we watch Cameron Belchian on his final attempt. I do not believe we will have telemetry enabled for this. No, it does not function when you're going back in the replay. So, yeah, I have to apologize to all the guys. I thought this would be over quite a bit sooner, but time management apparently is not one of my skills. So we'll do it this way. Cameron Belchian on his final attempt of the day. Again, this will remove his time from earlier, which I will bring up again just here briefly. So, as I mentioned a few times, these times are entering this session. So, any times from session 8, the final hour in here, that will remove their previous lap time. So, when a driver goes out, their run is deleted, and whatever they do now, in this case Cameron's attempt, that's their qualifying attempt. So, if he messes up at all now, that's going to be very costly. He could risk an invalid attempt. He could risk a terrible start position, or he might not even be able to make the field altogether. So everything is on the line here. First lap complete. As I will try my best to pull up lap times here if I can. Liam is asking if the rear ARB makes you faster. So a lot of people in the field do actually not know this. The rear anti-roll bar on this particular setup is disconnected. So whatever you do, it does not change anything. Normally the roll bars change the balance of the car. You can use the front roll bar and the rear roll bar. To keep it very simple for you guys, a stiff front bar, so 6 is the highest you can go, and a soft rear bar, 1, is usually the most stable. But if you want to loosen up the rear end as Cameron finishes up his run, is usually the fastest around the corner, but it can also be too loose, of course, which will then mean you will want to adjust the weight jacker or the roll bars to put them in the middle. But the rear roll bar is disconnected, so you cannot use that one. You can only use the front one. So what some people, including Liam, thought is that putting the rear bar in the middle at 3 is quicker. But it's placebo because it doesn't do anything. You can't drink water from an empty glass. So yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, that's that thing. Let me quickly move on to the next run, give those guys some more airtime as we look at the iconic schedule. of course, starts next week at Indianapolis, just before Bump Day. Finishes off on December 13th at Las Vegas. So Carol Stout's final attempt. This was around about 25-30 minutes ago. And he has also removed his time. So you can easily remove Ray Ritzer from that list. You can remove Cameron Belcher from that list, even though he was in the back anyway. So it doesn't really make a difference until he shoots up the order or not. And you can also remove Carol Stout from this order. So assuming he got a clean run in, this will move him up the field quite a bit. Assuming he can go quicker at least, which is the only reason I would think why you would want to go out again. If you've already qualified in P17, which is in the midfield, but it's comfortably in the field. So that's the only reason I can really think of that he wants to go again, is because he knows he can go quicker. Hopefully for him, he can execute it here on his second lap right now into turn 3. 2.5 minutes on the clock. So, like I mentioned, your previous run is deleted. I will make sure that we can get the most up-to-date starting grid for next week up on the screen before we go off the air. Before we do that, I'll address the chat one more time. Thanks everybody for tuning in so far tonight. I know it's a bit weird to look at replays for most of the hour. It's just incredibly hard to put on a planned and good show when the format is like this. This format was not created with the broadcast in mind. I addressed earlier today as well. So, like I mentioned earlier, there were requests for a broadcast, and I knew that I wasn't going to struggle to get into the field because I drive these ovals pretty much every day. So it wasn't a big ask for me to get into the field here, knowing that we will probably not get to the cars, or would be very close at least. So that's why I put my hand up and said, okay, you know what, I'll broadcast the final hour of qualifying to give people what they wanted, give some sponsor exposure, and including the Alzheimer's Association, which just popped up on my second screen there, which is perfect timing as Carol finishes up his run. But yeah, we just wanted to give Dan a moment as well to spread some more awareness. Of course, as we already touched upon, it's a very great and important cause. The Alzheimer's Association specifically in the US, but there's various other organizations in Europe, in Asia, all over the planet really, that support the same core, I guess, problem you can call it, which is the Alzheimer's disease and other kinds of dementia. So, you know, it doesn't always have to be the Alzheimer's Association directly, but we're all here to spread awareness for the disease in general and how to end it. So I think it's very important to give people like Dan, who is a great man as well, to allow him to educate us more about the topic. Because I'm not gonna lie, I did not really think about any diseases like this until Dan introduced me to it. So I think it's great for him to spread that awareness, as we do not have any runs left to run. So we have the sprint schedule up here because I was gonna go to a new run, but we don't have any people to look at. So that is it for qualifying, and now I can do the fun task and complete the starting grid in terms of the fastest 28, I believe we hit 29 people from today, who advance to the Indy 500 directly next week. So once iRacing has processed those results, we will get those entered in the spreadsheet and ready to go out and publish. But yeah, briefly want to thank again everybody who came out to the show tonight. Next week we will be broadcasting the Bump Day qualifiers. That will be all live. I am going to most likely switch up the format just slightly so we can all go out in order. We will try to coordinate that with everybody, but it will be best for everybody involved basically to have a proper show, and basically so everybody knows where they stand. So yeah, that's going to be very interesting to look at. It will be very similar to this. It will be very similar track temperatures and all that stuff. So the lap times will probably be very similar, as a number of big names will look to get into the field. But we got the qualifying results in. Cameron Bastian went to a 39 to 16, which is a very big improvement for Cameron. That's 4/10 of an improvement. All the way up to, oh my, that's going to be in the top 6. Wow, that's a very impressive run there by Cameron Bastian. As we have Carol Stout with a 39 to 34 lap average, as we will move him up to, which will be a tie with Craig Forsyth and Ray Ritz's old time. Speaking of Ray Ritz's, let's look at his old time. It's a 2:58, so he went slower on his final attempt. So he will slot somewhere in the P19, P20 range once we sort all the results. And then Lee Kane, the final driver, 2:82 4-lap average, which is a slight improvement. So that's going to conclude all the results. Let's sort them, and there we go. So that is going to be your fastest 27. Tijn van der Velde and Lucas Santos did not make the field today because of their invalid attempts. They did not have time to do another one. So your fast 27 from pole day today is Liam O'Sullivan on the pole with a 39.117, which is a 4-lap average speed in miles per hour of 230. So he is the first, and I believe the only driver to crack the 230 miles per hour barrier, which is a very impressive thing. We were talking about this early in the week in public as well. We were not expecting to see a 230 mile per hour run over 4 laps, but Liam has pulled it off. So again, it's Liam O'Sullivan on the pole, the inside of the front row. In the middle, it will be Edson Santos, and on the outside, myself. Then the final driver in the 39 ones is Andreas Eich on the inside of row 2. Then the middle of row 2, Fyodor Dovchenko and Cameron Bastian on the outside. Just improved from P27 all the way up to P6. Very good effort from him. Jaroslav Donskoy, P7, the inside of the third row. Then Mark Murphy, P8. He set his first and only run in the first session of the day. Lucas Lodato in the 9th position, the outside of row 3. Then we have Patrick Silvassi, Dan Inge, and Adam Millward on row 4. Sebastian Kinder, Hugo Gallas, and Craig Forsyth on row 5. Carl Stout, Gary Lovern, and John Christensen on row 6. Then we have Nathan Moore, Ray Ritza, and Joseph Morales on row 7. Those are all rookies in the field. Then we got Timothy Bree, Alexander Boney, and Lee Kane on row 7. Is that correct? Row 8, sorry. Then row 9, we have Jarno Kausch, Cody Meadows, and Jordan Evans. And of course, as I briefly touched upon, Tijn van der Velde and Lucas Santos have to go again next week on Bump Day. The broadcast will begin at around 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and the final hour lasts until, you guessed it, 7 p.m. Probably should have announced that a bit better to make it more interesting, but Bump Day qualifying next week, Friday, September 6th, from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern US time, from midnight to 1 in the morning for Central Europe. So that's going to be great for me. But yeah, that's it. That's going to wrap it up. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the broadcast today. Was a great thing to do again. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it's been a long time since I've done this. I hope I did a good job. If you think I did, make sure to leave a like on the broadcast and subscribe if you haven't done that already. Turn on the bell so you can be notified of all the broadcasts. The Sprint Series on Thursday, the Iconic Series on Fridays, and of course the IndyCar Series on Saturdays. So from me, from Dan Ensch from the Alzheimer's Association, thanks everybody for watching once again. And before I do go off, quickly check out the Alzheimer's Association at alz.org for more information and the option to donate. So that's it. See you all next week for Bump Day. See ya and good night.